Yeah, so the business of the divided brain. What I wanted to say is that since writing The Master and Emissary, I've gone on to write the book that uh, Lance referred to, which I'm hoping will be called The Matter with Things, which is in effect a sort of taking apart of the reductionist position which so much dominates our world, not just in science, but in public discourse about pretty much everything in the philosophy and the spirituality, as well as the arts and just about all that we believe about ourselves and who we are. So I address Plotinus's question, who are we, in the book? And I do it, of course, as I do everything, through the lens of the two hemispheres. And I think this is relevant to what I'm going to be talking about tonight. I take the phrase "the school of nothing buttery" actually from a former Oxford colleague of mine, alas now deceased, the philosopher J.R. Lucas, who had a very nice sense of humor. And like me, he was pretty unimpressed by the idea that the way you find out about something is simply to take it to parts and find that it consists of pretty much nothing at all, and therefore was all along nothing to be concerned about, let alone to love. And just one of the hemispheres would be likely to adopt this position. Sometimes people think that maybe I'm being rather reductionist to talk about the mind through an image of the brain, but in fact I'm not, because I'm not reducing mental activity, something I'll come on to talk about, to the brain in any sense at all. I'm just saying that it constrains the ways in which we think about the world. So just in a few sentences, what is relevant about the two ways in which our two hemispheres deal with the world? It's not that one of them does, as it were, logic and science and maths, and the other one does sort of painting and makes pretty pictures and hums little tunes like Pooh Bear. And it's actually nothing to do with what they do, because they're both concerned with everything. It's that the way in which they do it. And a lot of people will be very surprised to learn that the best contributions to science and maths, in fact, the work of the great scientists and the great mathematicians, relies very much on what I can demonstrate is effectively the right hemisphere, not the left, or the right hemisphere, in fact. Rote calculation, simply analyzing things into bits, yes, that is what the left hemisphere is very skilled at. But actually understanding what's going on, seeing connections and seeing the shape of things is not its strong suit. So effectively, what I believe is that the left hemisphere has this take on the world which prioritizes one little part of it. This has an evolutionary basis in that we need, in order to exist at all, to be able to focus on something that we require, whether it be food or a twig to build a nest or whatever it might be, and we need to do so accurately, sharply, and be able to manipulate it. At the same time, we need to be able to keep a wide open, sustained attention to the whole scene so that we know there's a predator coming, or those are my kin that I need to be getting food to. So that's the basis of the idea. And because of this, effectively, the left hemisphere has a very, very tiny, very narrow, probably about 3% of the, or sorry, 3 degrees of the whole 360 degrees arc, which is very much in focus. And that is all that it sees at any one time. The right hemisphere sees the whole picture, including the extremes on both left and right. And what this leads to is a vision in the left hemisphere of a world that is made up of bits, that is actually composed of things that are not connected, they're discrete fragments. They are static, because that's how you grab them, you fix them and you get them. They are taken out of context, because all the context has been sheared off. They are largely abstract. One's sense of what they are in one's life and in an embodied experience is not part of what the left hemisphere is interested in. They're categorized, they're no longer unique. So you have this world made up of little bits that you put together in order to make, I see, I've got a bicycle. Whereas the right hemisphere is seeing that nothing is ever completely distinct from anything else at all, that things are never static, but are involved in a 3 or 4 or 5 dimensional universe with many other things, that they constantly flow and change, and that they are things to which we are connected. We're not sitting in a kind of powerfully detached, almost psychopathic position of observation, whereby we work out what we want to do to manipulate things. So these give two completely different pictures of the world. One is a bureaucrat's dream, that's the left hemisphere's one, and the other is a bureaucrat's nightmare, because it's very hard to pin it down. So when we come to the idea of what we see, we're given two versions, basically. What I hinted at quite strongly in The Master and His Emissary, and make very plain in the first part of the new book, is that we can go a little further than saying there are just two visions. We can very strongly prefer one as more in touch with reality. Now, it has been put to me that how can you say that? Because if it's all coming through the two hemispheres, you'd need a third hemisphere that judges the first two. But it's not actually like that. As I think one of the greatest philosophers of the last 120 years, William James, pointed out, and as the whole pragmatist movement, including the brilliant C.S. Peirce, John Dewey, and so on, is that things are tested out on experience. Now, suppose you had two flight controls in your cockpit, and they gave you different information. You needed them both for different things at different times, but they seemed to be giving, different information that didn't exactly cohere. You were getting on fine, and you were told, I'm afraid one of them's got to go down. We haven't got enough power for both. You're only going to have to live on one. The test of which one is more in touch with reality is which one will keep you in the air longer, which one will crash you into a mountainside rather quickly. And my contention is that if you follow the image of the left hemisphere, you crash into the mountainside rather quickly. I believe that is indeed what we're hastening to do in the 21st century. And we haven't got very much time because we're approaching that mountainside extremely fast. So one can judge these things. And what I've looked at is the nature of the attention that the hemispheres pay to the world, the quality of their perceptions, which you can test against reality, the reality and subtlety of judgments that are made on the reality that is attended to and perceived, how much it is actually understood, both in terms of emotional and social intelligence, which is an enormous part of our life, and how much just in terms of good old-fashioned IQ, cognitive intelligence, and which is better at enabling us to make the imaginative move to whatever it is that we're trying to understand. And in every single case, I can demonstrate that the right hemisphere is superior. So we can get the signature of the right hemisphere because it sees a certain kind of shape when it looks at the world that is not pinnable down, is never ultimately knowable, is always in process, is constantly connected with everything else. And we know the imprint of the deceitful left hemisphere, which there are just dead bits that have to be put together. Now that's condensed, I think, 437 pages. So I won't say much more about that, except to make a contrast between two ways of thinking about an understanding. One is the analysis, where you say you take it apart, and you can carry on this process going down to cells, down to genes, down to atoms, down to subatomic particles. You can carry it on as far as you like until you can't find anything that you can actually specify at all, and you're left with nothing. This vanishing trick seems particularly difficult for people who pride themselves on not deceiving themselves to see through. But The other way is to see not by going down, but by going up, because if everything is connected, it says as much about me that I'm composed of cells as it tells you about a cell that it can go to make me. And this is true not just of living things, but throughout the universe. It tells you about the simplest things, as Alfred North Whitehead made very clear, what it is that they can ultimately come to be and express, as much as doing it the other way around. Why always look downwards? Why not look upwards? Because a very simple thing, there tends to be a culture of, has been for 100 years or so, a somewhat nihilistic one, of seeing the human being as a lonely alien in the universe, struggling to find meaning, struggling to make beauty, struggling to love. But what I'd like to point out is there's nowhere but out of the universe that love, imagination, creativity, beauty can come. Where do they come if they don't come out of that same cosmos? It's a fact that the cosmos has it in it to produce Bach's B minor mass. That is a fact. It's not my opinion. Now, if that's the case, it says something very interesting about the stuff of the cosmos.